about another. This is Oisin here. We'll just introduce Paul, or Colin will introduce him now again.
I did not talk about
this is Paul Browne. He is ex-Limerick county hurler. He was a vice captain, I think, when he won the All-Ireland back in 2018.
Yeah.
He's games development administrator in Limerick, and he as part of that, he looks after the you can correct me if I'm wrong. He looks after the under 14, 16s, minors, and under 20 hurlers, the development squads in Limerick. He's a big advocate and very experienced in game base. I've seen a couple of webinars that he's done, and they're so good. We learned so much from them. But if you want to take it over, Colin, there and carry on, and then hand it over to Paul.
No, that's fair. And fair play to Oisin for getting this one organised, because it follows on the theme of the last one as well, which again is games-based coaching, bringing games into it as much as possible, and getting you thinking about how you can do it rather than working off static drills, working off game-based coaching. Really looking forward to this one. And the best of luck, Paul, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks very much for giving us the time. Fair play to you. Well done, Oisin and Brian, for pulling this together again. Best of luck to you.
No bother, lads. Thanks a million. Just to check there, can you see something moving on the screen there for the last couple of seconds? Yeah, grand. Just to make sure they work. Listen, lads, thanks a million for asking me on. I suppose, to be honest, sure, we're all trying to do the best we can in the lockdown and the pandemic and keeping stuff going from the coaching side of things. So it's great to see a club being proactive and getting some webinars together. It's not easy to keep stuff going. I know I've firsthand tasted that for the last year now, but look, sure, just a small bit about myself. As Oisin said, I'm a GDA for Limerick City, the north side. So I suppose that's anything across the river in Limerick really is my area, so in the Pearshig, St. Pat's, deal a lot with the inner city there and my Ross and stuff as well, so that's kind of what the 9 to 3 job would entail, is being in and out of schools and helping with clubs there. And then I suppose after that, then I'm head coach at the Limerick Hurling Academy. So I suppose what that is I just have responsibilities, as Oisin said, from 14s to 20s there, and I suppose the overall, how our coaching runs, and I suppose the overall style of play for teams and stuff like that, so so I suppose, look, we've about 35 coaches there from 14s to 20s, so I'd be kind of leading up that along with some of the other lads in there and trying to keep things ticking over and try and make sure we can get as many senior hurlers through in Limerick as possible. And my own club is Bruff. Actually have a small tie to Fingallians. We have a Fingallians man below in our club in Bruff, Barry Menton. I don't know if anyone knows him. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. He's gone a good while now, but I was having a good chat with Barry the other day about the club and stuff, and he would have played when he was a young lad and stuff, but he's down in Bruff now for a good while. So he's always singing the praises of the club up there, and always for years he was trying to organise friendlies between the two hurling teams, but it never happened. But you'd never know, maybe it might happen into the future now. But sure, look, just to kick it off, I suppose tonight, I'd be hoping that it'd be interactive enough, as in if anyone has a question or anything, I'd be happy enough to answer it. I've put my email and my number at the end of the presentation as well. So again, happy to answer anyone who has any questions after that, really, to be honest. And I suppose the whole kind of format of the night is just, I suppose, getting us thinking about games-based coaching, what it is, what it isn't, how we can apply it to Gaelic football and hurling, I suppose, as I said, I'd be a hurling man first, but anything I say here tonight is equally applicable to both codes. It's not done with one code in mind or anything like that, so I suppose we just run through it. It's kind of two parts. The first part is kind of around games-based stuff, and the second part then is it's a bit around the tackle and stuff, and I suppose just looking at other sports and what we can take from other sports and things. So we'll kick off into it. And I said, look, if you have a question for it in the chat box, or don't be afraid to throw your hand up at any stage as we move through it, and we'll try and keep it close enough to the hour and not keep it too much longer than that, and answer a few questions after, but happy enough to stay on and talk about things. So I suppose, look, just I suppose from the games-based coaching point of view, and I suppose the origins or the thoughts behind it, where it came from, I suppose it came from Rod Thorpe really, and his teaching games for understanding, and he was an Australian, and I suppose it was just about creating good decision makers really was where it all came from, and I suppose that's kind of where it came from. And I suppose the whole thought process around that then evolved, and that good decision makers are made at a young age, you know, and by introducing it at a young age, and then they develop and learn, and it becomes part of their routine, and they learn through playing games and making decisions in games, as opposed to, you know, everything being fed to them and very kind of rigid or instruction based, you know. So I suppose that's kind of where I came from. So look, that'd be, when it comes to the academic side of things, I suppose Game Sense and Teaching Games for Understanding there would be two of the main kind of books around it. And even Rethinking Games for Teaching there as well. And I suppose, look, sure, just some of the quotes there. I suppose the greatest improvements in fitness and performance occur when training simulates the psychological, physiological and technical demands of competition. That would have been a big tool that Paul Kinnock would have used for years with Limerick, you know, that you had to simulate and stimulate more than what you would see in a match when it came to training. So I suppose you would often hear Limerick lads saying that's why our sessions were so much tougher than matches, because we were exposed to stuff we would never see in a game, really, you know. And I suppose, look, there's another one there underneath. Games-based approach encourages learning in authentic game-like environments to allow for easy transfer to game itself. So that's just kind of, I suppose, pattern recognition comes into the lot, you know, repeating patterns and looking at that kind of stuff. And I suppose exposing the players to it so they see it a couple of times before they ever see it in a match, you know. And then just coaches spent the majority of the session duration and activities deemed less relevant to gameplay. That's just a quote from Paul Kinnock's study that he actually did his PhD in inside UL here in the PES department. And I suppose it's just important to note that I suppose that was one of the findings he had, that it wasn't really relevant to gameplay, what he was seeing, you know, and what he discovered in his study. So it's just something we constantly need to think about when we're planning sessions and stuff. You know, does it replicate the match? And I suppose, is it very regimented or drill based, you know, and can we maybe do a bit better as coaches when it comes to planning and stuff? So just to, if I can move on. Oh yeah, there we go. So I suppose just yeah, there we go. So just, I suppose, what it is and what it isn't. Look, we've two kind of styles of coaching. We've our traditional style of coaching, we have our games-based style of coaching, really, in the GAA at the moment. There's nothing wrong with either, to be honest. And I see there definitely is a place for both. And that's something I'd be strong on. You know, you can't go full bull for games-based without having your traditional kind of skills and technical aspect covered, and neither can you go straight for the traditional part and exclude the game side of it. So I suppose, look, traditional, it's the drills, it's a higher ratio of drills, it's linear, and it's high repetitions of skill with little kind of opportunity for, I suppose, development or kind of stuff to go wrong even, you know. It's very kind of one pace kind of stuff, you know, and it's coach centered really, because the coach, you'd often hear the coach saying faster, or being involved in the middle of it and giving instructions, you know, whereas when it comes to the games based, obviously there's a higher ratio of games to drills. It's flexible, stuff happens, you know, it's non-linear, I suppose, that's the big thing there that Oisin would have been hearing about there for the last few weeks in the DCU coaching masterclass that we were on, you know. So that's the linear, non-linear kind of aspect of it. And there's a huge focus on decision making, and it's player centered, of course, you know. So the players are really the center of it, and they try to figure out the things that go wrong, and I suppose giving them problems and letting them figure out themselves. And I suppose giving opportunity for questions really is a big part of the games based approach. And, you know, like bringing in a group of players and saying, look, what's going wrong? How can we fix it? You know, and letting the players come up with the solutions. Whereas when it comes to having two cones and running around it and working on our first touch, you know, there isn't a whole pile of opportunity for questions or decisions there, you know. But at the same time, I'm not coming on here tonight and saying you should totally abandon a traditional kind of linear style of coaching. You shouldn't. You should get the mix right. And it depends what time of year you're at. You know, there's no point at the start of the year going straight into games based, because maybe you need to get your first touch right. Maybe fellas' fitness isn't right. So you need to give the players the tools to be able to be able to go through a games based session, you know, because if you don't and you go straight into it, your session might start breaking down. So it's very important that maybe at the start of the year you be 25% traditional and 75% traditional and 25% games based. And as the year goes on along, then as you get closer to championship, maybe you're 25% kind of skills and drills, and maybe you're 75% games based. So just, I suppose it's just it's moving that dial as you go throughout the year is an important thing to just keep in mind. So moving on, just first thing, I would be very strong on this point, and is that you can't go into a games-based approach without knowing your coaching philosophy. So if you don't know what you want from your players, how will your players know what you want from them? You know, so if you don't know, I suppose, what kind of style of play you have, you know, what defensive pattern you want to play, what you want to do up front, you know, what principles you expect from your players. If you don't know that yourself, and you don't have that written down, you can't just then go and throw a load of games on a piece of paper and expect the players to know what's coming back. So the player, you need to know your coaching philosophy, and so do the players. I have a couple of books here that are very good. I've read them, you know. John Wooden, obviously, we know that from UCLA. He's one of the top coaches in American college sports. He's brilliant. Pete Carroll there, Win Forever. That's a really good book, and it's really all about your philosophy as a coach, you know. It's an excellent book. It speaks about his disappointments and I suppose what he encountered, and I suppose getting fired a good few times, you know, as a coach. From, I suppose he got fired from the Jets, he was with the Patriots for a little bit. Things didn't go his way, you know, and eventually he went back to USC and created a real philosophy for himself, and went on to the Seahawks and won a Super Bowl. And Bill Walsh then, I suppose, is one of the greatest coaches in American football. And again, all that book really is about philosophy and leadership and stuff. And I suppose then, you know, just I have Moneyball thrown in there because I suppose when it comes to coaching philosophy, you kind of need to know, look, are you kind of stats based, and are you looking for certain things you want to hit in a game, you know, or are you more kind of, is it more kind of open, you know? So I just threw that in there. It's good to get different focuses and look at different things, and like no one thing is 100% correct, you know? So like I have there, it'll just guide your approach, and it'll give you a new reference point when coming up with ideas, because you can constantly refer back to your philosophy. Does it tick this box? Does it tick this part of my philosophy? Am I being true to myself? Do the players know what there is expected of them, you know? And my own one, I was just jotted this down there during the year, you know, forwards win, like it's always the backs will win the games, you know, and the forwards will decide by how much. But I actually think in GAA now currently, it's the forwards win the games with their work rate. The backs decide how much by with their quality of play and their defending and the ball they give to the forwards. And the midfielders now are becoming the real game, I suppose, changers. You know, you see, I suppose in hurling for all, since we've Will O'Donoghue and Cian Lynch here in Limerick and Darragh O'Donovan are really good examples of it. I suppose you've Brian Fenton above in Dublin, you know, and he's another really good example of a midfielder who decides when they really want to put their mark in the game. So that's just something I've come up with myself, and I suppose I base my coaching around that sometimes, you know, for the last year anyway. But it'll change as we go along. That's very important to note, that it will change. You can't stick to the same one the whole time, because the game changes as much as you will change as a coach, and you'll have different bunches of players, and some things mightn't suit. So you need to be very open to moving on with it. I suppose, yeah, so games-based coaching, just to go into the bit, why to do it? Well, I suppose it's more enjoyable, first off, and one of the best things about games-based coaching is you'll never be asked, are we playing a match? Because they'll know that there's a match every night at training. You know, it might be different stuff every night, but they'll know there's a match coming at some stage, or I suppose some kind of an aspect of a session where they score a goal or score a point to win. You know, it's very important for kids, especially. And I suppose that's the big thing about games-based coaching. Some people see it as something you start when you're 15, 16. I think it's actually the opposite. I think you'll be starting at as young as possible and introducing it, but how you do it will be different. And I'll speak about that as we go along. You know, I suppose what to do, and I suppose that comes down to your philosophy, the style of play you want, and the players you have. So if you have a really physical, strong group of players, maybe you want to mix it up and keep the play down the middle. You know, equally, if you have a fast bunch of players and not so physical and not great at tackling, maybe you've identified that. Maybe you want to keep it wide, and maybe that's how you style your sessions and stuff. You know, keep it wide, keep it moving at pace, ball to hand. You know, as I said, if you have a physical team, maybe you want to engage in contact the whole time, stuff like that. Exaggeration and emphasis, I have that down, the applied skills. As I said earlier, we must give the players the tools to be able to compete at the games-based style of coaching. You need to put them under pressure in different areas and kind of more isolated kind of areas, as opposed to just going straight into a game and expecting it to work. So I'll speak a bit about applied skills as well. That's something that we would really, really be strong on in Limerick at the moment. And it really comes from the seniors and Paul Connacht, this applied skills kind of aspect. And it's a lot to do with overloads and kind of different numbers and smaller spaces and stuff, you know. Player-centered, as I've said before, the players are the main focus of it all. And it's not just for elite players, as I've said. Games-based coaching is not just for senior into county. You can do it for anyone, and I'm really strong on that. It's just you need a small bit more thought as to how you do it. So it's about putting kids into situations in training that replicate and mimic the demands of an actual game, and forces them to make many more decisions than they would in a traditional session filled with predominantly drill-based activities. That's Mike Quirk from the Examiner. He's a really good podcast at the moment. He deals a lot with this. He had Derek McGrath on lately, and it was a very interesting chat around games-based and stuff, and you know, and principles and standards and all that. It's a really good podcast that he has. And I suppose, you know, if we want to develop better players, we need to take a game sense approach But I suppose the important thing about this is that when the committee come to watch, you know, that we don't use nice, neat drills, so that like sometimes, right, a games-based approach from the outside looking in. So if a parent is on the side of the field, or someone else that in the club maybe is looking at you, right, maybe it doesn't look as neat as it should, right? But when you're in the middle of it, generally it makes sense. You know, it's like looking at a pattern from outside as opposed to looking at the pattern from inside. You know, they look two separate, totally different things, but at the same time, it makes sense when you're actually in the middle of a session. And whereas from the outside, it might look chaotic. But I can guarantee you, generally, if there's a bit of chaos in training, the kids are enjoying it. You know, there's nothing wrong with a small bit of chaos in training. They'll end up making more decisions. I suppose just keeping the balance of keeping them in line as well at times can be, especially at a young age when it comes to this kind of stuff, you know, it'll go wrong sometimes, and that's very important to acknowledge. It's not always going to be right, and we need to be aware of that and just be ready to move on at times, you know. So yeah, the applied skills, look, these will start playing away there hopefully as we go. So I suppose just quickly to go through it, we just have some very simple 3v2s on one side. In the square there, then we have some 5v3s, you know, and then we have some 5v2s. So what are applied skills? High pressure scenarios really is the best way of describing it, and it's putting you under more pressure than you'll ever see in a match. And there's two aspects to this. It's putting you under more pressure as a player receiving the ball, but not only that, it's as the player's working. So those red dots there, you know, we have a 5v3 and we have and 5v2s, you know, and 3v2s. Like as a player, you mightn't often be putting that kind of scenario in a match, you know, the odd time, but it's important to expose players from a defensive point of view as much as it is from an attacking point of view. Overloads are important. So I suppose this is where it comes in, you know, the part of the applied skills for younger kids. You might make the space bigger and you might make the overloads bigger as well. So you might do, maybe you'll do 4v1, you know, to start it off with, and just give, or 3v1, and just give the three players the opportunity to keep the ball as much as possible. And as they get better at it, you go 3v2, and as they get better again at it, you go 5v3, you know, so increasing the amount of defenders and giving, putting them under more pressure when they're on the ball, you know. So it's just about, tailoring into what you have. Limited space, so realistically, let's say we're looking at the 3v2 square there in the left side of the screen. Like that might be 12 meters across by 7 meters deep on either side, so 24, 20 or 14 long and 12 across, you know, and a half in the middle in. So that's a really tight space. But what it'll do is it'll just make sure that our first touch is right and we're working on it. And you can do low ball, hand pass, you can do pass to hand, all that kind of stuff. You can do it for high catch, foot pass, you know, everything can be included in it. It's not a drill, but it is constrained more than, say, the game base might be. And you can change it really with subtle changes. So I suppose how you lay out your session, or how many grids you might have and stuff, you know. So I suppose that's what applied skills is. It's really high pressure overload scenarios, really. And like, you'd often might do your warm up and go into this then afterwards, you know, really to get your players thinking about what's coming down the line. And what you'll find is that at the start, the kids will struggle slightly, but it's important then to acknowledge that and make spaces wider, or maybe take out the amount of opposition players. But they'll struggle at the start, no doubt about it. But what you will find is they will actually adapt much quicker than you think they will. So you might think it's not working and that they're not getting it at all. But even in the space of one session or two sessions, you'll see a huge change in how they're able to adapt to the situations. And I suppose we must give the kids more credit than we give them at times. You know, they're well able for it. They're much more skillful than we are. Than I was when I was a young fella, that's for sure and certain. So they're well able, like the hurley rarely leaves their hands, or the football rarely leaves their hands, and all their skills and all that are really high. So give them credit for it, and just expose them to it and give them a chance to adapt it before you go away from it, really. I suppose, as I said, look, age grade differences there, it's important to acknowledge. As I said, young players are much more skillful than we give them credit for, so just bear that in mind. Space, make it bigger. Opposition, put less people in the square or in the rectangle. And the type of skill you focus on as well, you know, give them a chance, really. You know, if you're doing it for football, start with the hand pass and get them used to it from that aspect before you start introducing the kick pass or a bit of contact even, you know, that's down there as well as the bottom point. Maybe take contact out of it. They're not allowed contact, it's just shadowing. During the last lockdown there, I suppose, coming up to Christmas, I would have done an awful lot of applied skills where the rule was you weren't allowed to touch the player, you know, so just an easy way of getting around it. There's a small bit of contact at times, you know, and they feel like they're doing something close to a game, but at the same time, you've put a kind of a constraint in there, they're not allowed to touch the players, and you can still get away with doing some really good work, whereas it's not so kind of in our pods of 15, you know, where it was non-contact, and at times you might end up doing very isolated skills. The applied skills is a good way to kind of bridge the gap there and just introduce a constraint that are not allowed to touch each other, and that kind of gets you away with it. And as I said, the type of skill focus, as I said, in football, maybe go to the hand pass to start with. In hurling, maybe let them hand pass or do whatever's most comfortable at the start, you know. Don't go straight into asking them to pass the hand or straight into asking them to strike at the ground, you know. Give them a chance maybe in the hurling then just to kind of work on whatever skill comes comfortable to them, whether it's a scoop pass or a hand pass or a stick pass, whatever it is. Kind of the same as the football, you know, don't force them straight into kicking in these small areas, or and you know, you can make it bigger as well, you know, for kick passes and stuff as well, but obviously then the bigger it is, the kind of more kind of pressure you lose, you know, if that makes sense. I suppose from the analysis point of view and the games-based approach, just to speak about it briefly, I won't go into too much of this now, but it's a really good, it marries together lovely, you know. I suppose obviously this now might be for older age grades, but I suppose if you're preparing for a team, if you're a very traditional coach, linear coach, and you're preparing for a big game, like what you're going to be working on is down very much to what you have in front of you as a coach and your players. But I suppose when you're use the games-based approach to prepare for the teams you're coming up against, you might have seen a video of them, you might have been to one of their games, they might be very good at a certain aspect of play, and you can prepare your teams coming up to that through a games-based approach, you know, just to get ready for what's coming down the line. You know, as I said, if a team is very quick and they like to keep it wide, how are we going to prepare for that from a games-based approach, you know, for the couple of weeks coming up to a big game? Maybe we'll play an extra defender, you know, make it hard for them to get through. Maybe you play it down the middle and force them down the middle. Maybe we'll start wide and force them down the middle and give them opportunities down the middle, open up, expose that, because they want to keep it wide, you know, stuff like that. You can prepare for all that the weeks coming up to games. You can use a post-match to solve problems, you know, stuff you've seen after games that you've experienced. Maybe you've had a loss and you want to fix it. You can use the games-based approach for that, and it's just a tool to assess performance or expected performance as well, you know. So if the players come up to games and you've worked on a certain thing and you know it's going well, then obviously it'll give great confidence to you and the players going into it. And I suppose just some homework for the players as well. You can send them away and tell them come up with a game to deal with X or Y, you know, on a certain evening. Maybe something hasn't worked in training and you want to send them home and say, listen, lads, the next time we come in now, someone has to come up with a game to deal with, I don't know, how we get the ball into the full forward line when there's a sweeper, stuff like that, you know, if a team you're played against has a sweeper and stuff. So just to bear that in mind, there's loads of uses for it. And from an analysis point of view, often you'll see if you have statsmen or anything like that, they love coaches who work with the games-based approach, because the statsmen then can have a bit of a say in how we prepare and what they're seeing and stuff like that. So that's just something to bear in mind. You could spend a whole webinar really going through this kind of style of stuff, but just a little taste there of that and what it can be used for. From planning a session point of view then, when it comes to the GBA, I suppose it definitely requires more thought than a regular traditional session. I had a good chat with Paul Knurk lately. We talk a lot, I've been good friends with him. Obviously from him coaching me, and I suppose then from the academy work, he'd be very involved in that too. But he maintains like that if your session's an hour, you should spend an hour practicing, you should spend an hour planning it. No, and maybe you won't spend an hour, but you should set aside that much time and give it the respect that it requires, you know. It's not really good enough as a coach these days, I suppose, for what kids are looking for. You know, it's not really good enough just to sit down and throw it in the back of the cornflakes box, which I used to get at senior intercounty level. At times we used to have some coaches who'd rock on with the back of a cornflakes box and the skills for the evening written down in it, you know. So I suppose that's not really good enough. So give the kids the respect and the session the respect it deserves, and take a bit of time and put into planning it. Include everything. Isolated skills in your touch work, there's a place for that. Tactical work, there's a place for that as well, you know. You might start off with your warm-up, as I said, go into some applied skills, go into a game, maybe our striking to hand is broke down, go into some isolated work for that, do that for 5 minutes, go back into the game again, see has it improved, you know, identify the area that's not working well, let the players know, tell them you're working on it, and go back and try it again and see has that aspect of the play improved. As I said before, what stage of the season you're at. when it comes to planning a session will determine how much of this kind of approach you can use. As I said, if you're going back early in the year and the ground isn't right, or, you know, and it's heavy ground and it's more about getting your fitness right, well, then you can use the games-based approach for that, sure. But like, we equally need to give the time to getting our skills up to scratch as well, as I said earlier, to be ready to go into that kind of style of stuff. What stage of the week it is, you know, maybe you might tone down the games-based approach. If you have a game on a Sunday, I know with Limerick, if you have a game on a Sunday, big game, Tuesday evening would be quite tough. A lot of games-based approach involved in it, a lot of applied skills. The Friday before, you'd see a huge decrease in that. Now, the intensity would be up, but you wouldn't be doing half as much kind of games-based stuff. You'd take some time working on isolated skills. And I suppose, look, athletes and I suppose sports people, especially GAA players, like, you know, they like to know their first touch is in. They like to feel good about themselves. And the Friday before a game really isn't the time to be introducing a new game or flogging fellas in a big white grid, you know, or even introducing a huge amount of contact. You know, you want to limit the chances for fellas to get injured, but at the same time, you do need a small bit of it to make sure we're sharp and stuff for games on Sunday. But like having a bit of isolated skill work the night before a big game is no harm, you know, just to make sure fellas' touch is right, they're feeling good about themselves. And just other factors then to be thinking of is, you know, the pitch. What pitch we're on? Are we on Astro? Are we on grass? You know, what's the weather like? Is it cold? Is it warm? You know, do we need to include more breaks, less breaks? Like, is it windy? Do we need to go away from striking? Do we need to work on, if it's windy, you know, just because you come to a session and it's really, really windy, right, doesn't mean that you can go away from the games-based approach. We're like, Jesus, it's really windy now. Our striking won't be strong tonight. You know, the lads won't be able to strike into that wind. No, stick to what you've planned, but change what you want out of it. You know, go with the hand pass, you know, right? If the wind is up and you think they won't be able to kick or strike it into the wind, that's fine. Let's go with the hand pass. Let's work our session through the hand pass tonight, you know, as opposed to going away from it. And the kids will appreciate that, you know, that you're not going away from it just because the weather is bad. They'll obviously stay warmer because we way more moving in it than standing up, you know. So that's just something to keep a thought on. And I suppose planning is a critical part of the coaching process. Expert coaches report thoroughness in planning is having a great impact on the success of coaching a session. So again, same as the point above, just something to bear in mind. Generally, the more time you'll spend planning a session, the better it'll go. And what I often like to do, especially with the games-based approach, is, and especially if I'm trying something new, right? If I want to do 4 things of training tonight, I plan for 6, because inevitably some nights, for whatever factor it is, the kids are tired, you're tired, you've had a long day at work, the kids have had a tough time at school, they're going through exams, or, you know, or whatever time of year it is, you know, they're distracted, or they haven't even slept the night before, or I don't know, something was on, I don't know, whatever they stayed up to watch, or anything like that can come in to be a factor. But sometimes things will just go wrong at a session, and it's very important to acknowledge that, just have stuff as a kind of a backup to kind of use and go into. So just to go on then, I suppose this is just an example of a session that I did up there, just to kind of I really demonstrate how you can use games-based approach. So literally took this from, I'd seen a little clip of Pep Guardiola working on zonal play for Manchester City. You know, he's big into that, and I suppose zones in the field, right? And I suppose this comes back to what you can look at other sports for. Now, I'm not saying that this is I'm not saying that we're going to bring zonal play into training, right, or anything like that, or it's the new way the GAA is going to go. I think the ball moves a bit quick at times for this kind of stuff, but at the same time, it's just interesting to know that you can kind of throw your hand at anything really and come up with a bit of a session to do with it. So dividing the pitch into zones there. So I've kind of divided the pitch into zones. We have an attacking and kind of defending side of things, and we've zones in the middle then, and I suppose our secondary team obviously for this kind of stuff is support play. So how would we go about it? If I was doing it, I'd have a warm-up, right? Vigorous warm-up if you vest and sea lads or whatever, or you do one yourself for the GAA 15, whatever it is, get it in the warm-up, include a bit of touch work, a bit of isolated skills, and then go into a bit of applied skills. So get our lads ready for this. So if we've zones in the middle of the field like that, what do we need to work on? We need to make sure our pass to hand is crisp, right? Our kick passing, our hand pass is crisp, and our support play. So let's go into a bit of applied skills there. and work on that, play a game, go back to our isolated or applied skills, whatever applies. You know, if stuff has been breaking down, go into isolated skills. If it's been going all right and we want to build it up again for the last part of it, go into our applied skills again, you know. So just, I suppose, giving the time to whatever needs really in a session, and being flexible and being ready for either side of things really. So just to go into that, the applied skills you might use might be something like this, some 5v3s with some support play there. Okay, so that just works on, I suppose, the tight kind of areas and what we can look at there from that point of view. So 5v3, maybe you might go with 5v2 if it's younger. Maybe you might go with 3v1 or 4v1 if they're younger again, you know, and you're working on this stuff. And on the right, then we have a kind of a 4 zone kind of a thing, just where the only thing is you must move the ball up and down through the zone. So as you see there as it's rolling along. So try and get that to play again there. But it's just rolling along there. So on the right, and all they have to do is work the ball up. So that just goes through. So we've done our small, on the left of the screen, we've done our small side, kind of a narrow, kind of a tight kind of work. And on the other side of the screen, then we've been on about moving our ball up through the field, really, in our zones or in our lines. Okay, so game one, then you might do, so this might look complicated, but you're doing on the left of the screen, there's a bit of, it's 2v2 inside in each zone, up and down the field. So it's just support playing, moving the ball. And on the other side, then we have our backs and we have our forwards working. So on the inside line on the right of the pitch there, it's the full forward and full back line. And you've half forwards midfield and half forwards then by the small goals there, if we can see it. And it's just a ball fit in 50-50, work on the ball, score a goal, deliver it. Okay. So that's the kind of stuff you might introduce for the game one and swap them over. You know, you might do maybe. That is quite tough work there, really. Now, this one that I've demonstrated there, that's quite a hard session to be doing. A lot of running involved in that, so you mightn't do a whole pile in it, but it's just an idea of what you might do for the first part of the session. And all it's doing, everything is building towards that last part of the session, really. You know, so. And then this is the last game we might do, where we're introducing our zonal play. And it's just about one person only can occupy each zone. But look, you have on the right of the screen, you have the full forward line moving back into those wide zones, spreading the field, really. This is something Limerick do at the moment, you know, and work on. So spreading the field, moving into those wide zones, collecting the ball, going again, you know. So if you just play it through again, you see everyone is in a zone, just moving it through. And just trying to score a goal. And look, as I said, that might look a bit complicated. Maybe there's too many zones you've decided on one night, you want to go back to it again. And maybe we'll vary it and we'll make only a couple of zones, and the same thing again. And everyone has a zone to be in, plenty of movement, plenty of opportunity to score goals, plenty of opportunity for touches. So that's the kind of stuff we can work on there. Again, look, I am conscious of time and stuff, and maybe I'm flying through some things, but I'll happily send on all these clips to you to have a look at. And if anyone wants to stay in touch or ask questions, I'll be happy to answer. Some of the challenges with this kind of aspect of games is obviously, number one, creating new games and content. The most challenging aspect of any coach really is coming up with your own stuff. 95% of coaching is thievery, really, if we're being honest about it. Oisín there has a good game. I've seen his session. I'll rob that, take that, right? That's grand. You know, it works great, right? But at the same time, it might work equally. It mightn't work because maybe you haven't decided on your coaching philosophy. You haven't really narrowed down your style of play or what you're looking for, your players. And what Oisín has done there mightn't work for Paul's team. You know, maybe he's really taken the time to work on his coaching philosophy, his style of play, his style of players that he has, and he's come up with this game. And it might work for him and look great, and it might be totally wrong for what you're trying to achieve. So yes, you can take stuff from other coaches. I do it the whole time, right? But it's important just to say, why am I taking it? What am I taking? Is it going to work for my team, right? So you can assess from assessing performance of the game. At times it can be chaotic, as I've said, and you mightn't be able to assess exactly how it's gone. And then, as I said, what happens when it goes wrong is very important too. You know, that you do have some fallbacks, and as I said already, the chaotic part of it, just that you're comfortable with it and that you stick with it and you don't go away from it just because the session looks messy or anything like that. And there, just have that little dial again. You know, start of the season, 75% technique skills, 25% games. As we get to championship, or into the summer months, we spend 25% on technique, because generally the kids will be out doing their own stuff anyway, you know, off a wall with a ball or with a hurley, you know, so they'll be getting that technique side of things done because it's the weather's fine and they're out in the evenings and stuff. So when they get to games, let's give them 75% games. Let's let them enjoy the session. Let's let them run around. Really is the most important things. Let's let them score goals. Let's let the child go home, the girl or the boy go home and say, "Ma'am, Dad, I scored a goal tonight." You know, that's such an important thing. I have a 10-year-old brother, and like, you know, like when he goes in the door at home, the first thing my mother asks is, "Did you score a goal tonight? All right, did any goal tonight?" You know, and he's actually likes playing in the back, so he rarely gets up the field, and he's very conscious of that. But like, it's the first question asked. It's the first thing any child will tell you when they come home. "I scored a goal today," right? So give them a chance to score goals in the games. If you go with the games-based approach, there's an opportunity for kids to score loads of goals in a match. They'll be sick of scoring goals, you know, but at the same time, they enjoy that small little buzz every time you do. As an adult, when you're doing the games-based approach, you get a score, you get enough passes to get a score, you run through some gates or whatever it is. There's a buzz off it, so make sure the kids appreciate that too. So just moving on then, just going to speak a bit about some other sports now for the last maybe 15-20 minutes of the presentation. And I'm a firm believer in this. I said recently in a webinar that from a GAA point of view, I suppose the games-based approach to the GAA is so new that we don't really have the literature, or we don't have any studies or anything like that. They're coming out now, all right, you know, and you see some stuff and you see some coaches doing it, you know, but it's only really starting to come. But all these other coaches are looking into this for years and years, so there's no point being ignorant about it. And like, I agree, the GAA is a fantastic sport. Hurling and football are brilliant, right? Okay, but we're not the best in the world by any means at some sports, you know, or some aspects of coaching. So don't be ignorant about it and think you're brilliant or there's nothing to be learned. There's so much to be learned from other sports you can take into GAA. The games-based approach pervades most other sports, really, to be honest. Soccer, as I said, the top diagram there, that's Pep Guardiola's method of dividing the pitch for Man City. I took that from an article online. You know, from the basketball point of view, you've Tex Winter and the triangle offense. I suppose if anyone watched the Jordan documentary during the year, I suppose this was a big part of how they ran their offense. And I suppose that's kind of a games-based kind of approach as well, you know. And whilst it can be regimented, I think off every pass, that in this system, off every pass in this basketball system, there's 37 outcomes that can happen, you know. So like, there's loads of decision making there as well. Like, the All Blacks even have gone down this route as well when it comes to rugby, and there was a desire to produce more intelligent players with enhanced perception and decision making skills. And this is why they've gone towards this kind of a player-centered coaching approach to develop good decision makers and good leaders, you know. And it really came about from a lot of disappointing World Cups. So I mean, if all these other sports are using this approach or taking things like this from it, well, we'd be foolish not to really tap into it, you know. So from that then, I'm kind of going to go into a bit about the tackle, and I suppose how I've looked at another sport to work on some of the stuff for the tackle. So what I did for this is there's some quotes here from some of the Limerick hurlers. So I'll leave it up on the screen there, and you can just read it for maybe a minute on each screen, you know, and just get a taste of it. And again, I'll get this out to you if you want to have a better read of it. So on this page, Darragh Donovan, Dan Morrissey, Sean Finn, and Richie English. And Sean Finn was so passionate about the tackle, I could have got a book out of him, but there's 2 quotes there from him. So I'll just leave it up there on the screen for just 2 seconds, and I'll just take a drink of water, and you can have a read of that there while we're watching it. Give me another few seconds. I'll move it on. And as I said, I can get these out here. You can be sent on to you, you know, if you want to read these. There's a good bit in it, and it's some great little points that some of the top intercounty players are looking at with the tackle, you know. And granted, they are hurling, but I think it comes across the both codes really. And on this side then, just move on. Tom Morrissey, Keane Lynch, Grod Hegarty, Barry Nash and Kyle Hayes are on this side. So again, I'll just give you another couple of seconds there just to have a read of this one. So we'll move on there now. So what are we seeing there? So some of the keywords that kept coming up with all the players: feet, body position, angles, anticipation, first contact, breaking momentum, measured and calculated. Very interesting that none of the players spoke about having a fella or coming out in a big heat or anything like that, or getting the crowd going. Measured and calculated. Most importantly was to win the ball back. Doesn't matter how you do it. The more measured and calculated you are, the better chance you've of doing it and not selling yourself short. Don't wrap in and out the whole time. And the ball was the one that kept coming out. Wait for the man to play the ball. It would have been something in Limerick that we would have learned a few harsh lessons with over the year coming up against Kilkenny, and some of the Kilkenny players from playing against them. I know that one of the big things is you'd actually have the ball in your hand and you'd be coming at them and you put it back into hurley. And like when you have the ball in your hand running at them, they would never come near you. You'd never get a touch. You'd be wondering why they're not coming at you. And as soon as you take your fourth step and you're ready to put the ball back into hurley, bang, they're in like a flash. So they're waiting. So they're really anticipating that. That's something the Limerick lads at the moment are really looking at. They're very good at it. Peter Casey is the best example I have of it. He will literally shadow you. He'll watch you. He'll count your steps out in his head. He's told me this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Around then, he'll start getting ready. And as soon as you look like you're putting the ball back in hurley, bang, in like a flash, ball gone. Okay, so they're just waiting for that measured and calculated moment to strike, you know. So from this then, if we take those kind of words and we look at what's involved in them, you know, and we move on, like some people will laugh now, or we might have some people logging off here now with this, but like American football and the offensive linemen, the men who protect the man, that's really what they are. And what does an offensive lineman need to be successful? Intelligence, toughness, work ethic, good character, athletic ability. If we were to pick our ideal GAA player tomorrow and we were to give 10 things that we wanted them to do, those 5 would be in there anyway. That's for certain. Okay. They dictate how well a quarterback can play on every single down, right? And there's a reason they're like the Green Bay Packers set the record this year for paying these fellas. So a 4-year deal for $92 million. One of these fellas got David Bakhtiari. Now the day after he signed it, I'd be a Packers fan. The day after he signed it, he tore his cruciate. So that's beside the point. He never played again for the rest of the year, right? But if these fellas are getting paid that much money and there's so much value put in them, right? And their job is to protect someone, right? And then we can look at these and say, what are they doing that we can transfer over? And it's just during the lockdown, I saw a bit of a game here, and it'll come up after this that you can do with training. So similarities between American football linemen and the GAA, right? Stop the defense reaching the quarterback, stop the player passing you. Very similar, right? You want to stop the linemen want to stop someone getting to the quarterback. We want to stop the player getting past us. If you chop, in American football, it's called 15-yard penalty. Same in hurling, can't tackle low at the legs. If you clip, right, 15 yards, that's what it is. It's a push in the back. Can't do that in hurling either, or football. Face mask, 15 yards. You can't do it in the GAA or in hurling anyway, or you can't go at the face in football. You can't go higher, grab the jersey up high, right? So same again. And holding, can't grab the jersey, okay? So all those rules are in place for these linemen, right? And they're able to do their job still. And that's what really is in place for the tackle too. So what can we learn from it, you know? And as I said, they're getting paid so much money, what we can learn stuff from it. So this game here, right, it's very simple. The man in the middle must keep the player on the outside away, right, or just stop him getting around him. So he must keep his body squared in the whole side. So what transfers over from this game? So the player on the outside is trying to be really explosive and change direction and catch the player in the middle off guard. And how does this transfer? Hand movement, first contact on the chest, which came up in the quotes above. Feet movement, again, hips aligned. These are all the same things we're looking for in the tackle all the time in GAA. Keeping our hips lined up so we don't get turned. Keeping our feet moving so we're strong in the tackle. We don't get flat-footed. First contact on the chest to break momentum. That's all about what the tackle is all about these days. A short, intense burst, same again. And obviously, it's the same energy system, you know. So it's that sharp, quick, kind of 10-second kind of an effort. Okay? Now, you might be saying here, how do I do this with a group of 10-year-olds in my club if I'm coaching 10-year-olds? How do I do it with a group of 12-year-olds? I coach the Bruff under 10s. My brother plays them. I coached them for 7 weeks there coming up to the Christmas. And we worked on the tackle for 7 weeks. The difference between the players between week 1 and week 7 was like chalk and cheese. They were like different fellas. Not only for a group of 10-year-olds, whether it's good or bad, no, the boys, not only did their kind of physicality and how they were tackling improve, but their enjoyment they got out of it was huge, because how you do it is very important. And as I said, what they're doing there in that little clip, right, isn't really what you're looking for. You know, I wonder will this link work? No, okay. I can send it on after. These videos are terror online, they never work. Like they'll really enjoy it. But again, it's just thinking about it. What they've done there is not exactly applicable to what we're looking at, but what can we take from it and use? Okay. So what I did, if you bear with me for just a few minutes, so a 5 to 10 minute block at the start of training, right? So they were playing hurling, but we also on a Wednesday we do every second week it was hurling and football, and on Saturdays the same. So they were doing these for hurling and football, okay? So and we worked on both. 4 cones in a diamond shape, right? If you can imagine that, and 2 steps just between each cone. So it's a nice short little area. 1 player inside, 1 player outside. The player inside tucks the bib into their shorts, okay? And there's no contact from the player outside. He cannot enter the cone area, okay? So what the player outside then is trying to do is get the bib out of the back of the player inside shorts. So what's included in this? Lateral feet, keeps the hips lined up and don't show your back for the inside, right? So that's what you're doing the whole time, same as the lad in the last clip there, what he was trying to do. And for the outside then, it's unpredictable movements and explosive, right? So what happens is the lad in the inside tucks the bib in, he tries to keep squared up so the lad in the outside can't get around and get his back to get it. So it's the exact same thing as we'd be looking at in a match, right? So how would you start it? You'd start it really low, no contact, okay? Even helmets off, hurleys off if you're doing hurling. With the football then obviously you don't need to worry about that, so you can go straight into it, you know, and then you build it in as you go along. And for progression then add in some contact. So now the player inside can contact the chest to keep the player outside away. So we're working on that part of the tackle again and creating space, right? So this time now take the bib away and put a ball in the outside player's hand, okay? So this time now the outside player is trying to touch the ball off the back of the inside player, okay? So a big ball, a first touch ball is ideal. So this time now, as the player comes around and tries to touch the back, the inside player now can work on knocking the ball out of the hand. So they can get the contact in the chest and they can knock the ball out of the hand. So same as we're working on in a match again. That's what we're looking for in the tackle, right? So as I said, the inside player can use chest contact as before, create space, and then swipe down the ball. And as I said earlier, for hurling, the final progression would be that in hurleys and maybe make the space a bit wider and have them running at them instead of really kind of the constrained kind of a space. Now, I wish I had videos of this. We had the week we had planned to do it, we got shut down. So unfortunately, I don't have videos. I do hope to have them at some stage. Again, I can forward them on. I can't really stress how much the players enjoyed this. It was something that was different, they hadn't done. I really sat down, I looked at the video I'd seen and I said, what can I take from this that'll transfer over into GAA? And there was loads there, right? So, and their tackling improved hugely. And what you actually saw was, you saw less kind of fellas going bald-headed into tackles in training. And what you actually saw was a bit of measured and calculated kind of play and getting the contact in the chest. And you saw a huge amount of fellas knocking the ball out of lads' hands, you know, in both hurling and football. So the ball became the focus as opposed to kind of stopping a fella or knocking him back or anything like that, you know. So just something that we did, and it was interesting and worked really well, and they really enjoyed it. Okay, so, and then lastly, just on the tackle, just some important things to note, right? So as I said earlier, give the players the tools to be able to do the games-based approach. So if we want to work on the tackle or the swarm tackle, say we want to build it into our sessions from a games-based approach, well, if you don't give the players the chance to do that in a kind of a constrained or kind of isolated environment, sure, they're never going to improve the tackling. And you'll be there now, you go straight into your game at your training session, and you'll be like, why can't Johnny tackle there? That's a terrible tackle. He left him straight past him. But you've done him a disservice by not giving him the chance to practice it and get good at it first before you put him into the situation where he has to do it in a bit of a game kind of a scenario, you know? So encourage the work rate in the swarm tackle and build it into sessions, but build it in slowly. Start low, as I said, week 1 with those lads, and they were 10 years of age now, and I'm not messing when I say I was doing this with 10-year-olds. I really was, and they were well able for, as I said earlier, the kids are well able for whatever you throw at them. They adapt so quick. So give them the respect and give them the opportunity to do it, right? Week 1, week 2, week 3, really low level stuff, bibs, the balls, very little contact. As we went up, week 3, week 4, week 5, bit more, obviously building in a bit more contact to the chest. Week 7, then we kind of went into a bit of we went into some overloads really. And what we weren't really focusing on the quality of passes to hand or anything like that. We were looking for lads to get some tackles in that kind of scenario. So I suppose, look, there's a bit of give and take. You're not going to get the best of both worlds when you're introducing these things. So you have to just be willing to take some of it. So just interesting points from these are stats from hurling anyway, just for you. So 1 tackle, you have a 1 out of 6 chance of winning the ball back. 2 is 50-50. 3 for the swarm tackle, 8 out of 10, and 4 is 100% all the time. So what you do on the pitch must come back to your overall principles. They must overact your session, and the technical must be built in. What are your thoughts? And if it comes to tackling, just say, for instance, defensive system, are you zone, are you man marking, just sweeper, deep line half forward lines, deep line midfielders, Romans and forwards, okay? And very important, forwards must tackle more, okay? So that's a very important thing just to know it, and to encourage that in your sessions, and to really reward fellas for turning over the ball or for tackling. That's a big thing, you know. So put as much emphasis on a tackle or a turnover for the lads as you would for a goal, you know. So it's so important that they get the reward for doing something well, or tackling from behind, or making that 10 or 15 yard burst, even in training. You know, isolate them and call them out and say, well done, that was great, keep that going, that's as good as a goal, you know, all that kind of stuff, and they'll feel great about it and they'll do it more. So this is just something I did, you know, I just threw it together. Yesterday evening I would have had some stuff like this for some of our academy work. So I suppose just if we were to introduce the games-based approach for a club, what would we do? So the line down the middle there, if you can see it there, if you can see my cursor, that's kind of, and I'm not saying these are your principles by any matter of means, I'm saying these are just ones I put down on the page. These are ones you might focus on at the start. What are the important ones for Fingallians? What are the important ones for the club? You know, what do we want the players to do from 11 to 17, and they overarch the middle of the triangle there, you know. So we started at under 11 when we're introducing the games-based stuff. This is what we might start at, or even at 9s, you know, we might start doing a small bit of it, but might be a bit young at that age. So at 11s, what do we want them to do? We want them to be able to tackle, hand pass, pass the hand, clear line of vision, and demand the ball. Very important one there, last one, getting players to ask for the ball the whole time. Right, so then at 13s, what we introduce, we might go with the ground pass. We might start introducing in the games-based scenario, and protecting the D. You know, a very important one again, especially at 13s when they're getting out onto the big pitch now and stuff like that. So protecting the D is hugely important. We still do the main ones in the middle, but the applied skills then might come in as well, and some of our overloads, as we said. So up again, you'll see that the same stuff stays in, but you just add in some more stuff. At 15s, then what we do, might work on restarts and our transitions, defense to attack and attack to defense, right? So that kind of stuff. Third man run and width of play, I suppose runs out wide and stuff, as well as keeping the ball wide and keeping play out wide and creating channels and stuff to run into. Again, get to 17s, all the stuff that's been done underage is still focused on and not forgotten about, but this time out we'll introduce support play, formations, depth. We might do puck out runs through the lines and tackle from behind, and even stuff like third man, as I said, third man run with some backdoor cuts and stuff like that. So that was just something that's how you might introduce a kind of a games-based approach, because I suppose the worst thing for a coach, and I know myself, is if you're sitting down at home and you're like, oh God, what have I to work on tonight? There's so much to work on, right? And I could work on 100 things when it comes to games-based approach, right? But I suppose at this age, then you'll say at 11s, as a coach, I need to try and build these 5 things into my session, right? As a 13s, then you say, right, they're really good at those 5 things, okay, but I'm going to add in these things, you know, and I'm not going to forget about those 5, but I'm going to add in 3 or 4 more. And as we go up again, then everything is still included, but as they get better as players and more intelligent and their game sense becomes better, we can start to do some more stuff. So that's just some of the stuff there that we can do. So look, I suppose that's kind of the run through. I hope I didn't go through it too quick. There was a lot in it, I'm conscious, you know, but conscious not to keep people longer than an hour. I know from work with the GDAs, after about 45 minutes online, people start to zone out, but I hope you took something from it. Look, there's my email address there, my phone number if anyone texts me or throw me on WhatsApp, or if they have any questions, any kind of resources I have, any of those clips, I'll forward on to Oisín, you know, on WhatsApp, and he can get them into your coaching groups to have a look at or whatever, you know, there's no problem there. If you've any interest in keeping on to that, again, I'll send that on, no issue there. Maybe it might be something you use, maybe you use it already, I don't know. I just know it's something that's very handy from my point of view. I find it really handy just to focus the mind as to what I'm looking at. And if anyone has any questions at all, I'm very happy to answer them.
Yeah, if anybody's any questions, put them in the chat room there. I've a call. I thought it was brilliant, Paul. That was really interesting. And I've just a couple. Where do you start? How do you start? You know, say putting a session together, or you know, so we're say when we come back in a month's time or 3 months' time, whenever it is, and I'm starting to put sessions together for this, what do I start with, or what do I look to do? What's my starting point?
If it was a normal year, Oisín, I'd be telling you, sit down and plan out your year, and you'll know when your matches are, and you'll know what kind of skills you want to focus on, and whatever age you're at, you might have different focus on the skills. If you're coaching younger kids in the club, you might be focusing on their technical skills only, so the nursery, the 7s now, the 9s as they are now, and that's what it is in Limerick anyway. Have you adopted that in Dublin as well? Have you, or would you have age groups in between?
We'd have 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of the clubs in Limerick at the moment mightn't have the numbers. So it's kind of, in Limerick at the moment, you're a nursery, say under 6s, and then you have 7s, 9s, 11s, 13s, 15s, 17s. That's how it's going. But what I'd be saying now, lads, when it comes to and ladies, if they're in line, it's when it comes to coming back on the field now, I would be, for the first couple of weeks anyway, I would be playing matches with the kids. I'd be letting them, as soon as you're allowed to do some contact, I'd be letting them, play a few games, get used to scoring again, get used to playing on the pitch. Like they've been isolated for so long that it's, especially for some younger kids who might have been just getting onto the big field and stuff like that. Don't underestimate how much of a change that is to go from playing in juvenile goals to the big goals. It's a massive change. The pitch is way bigger. They get lost in the pitch at times, so giving them the chance to adapt to that and not going, as I said, full bull into some things, and like then from when it comes, like we'll probably have the good chance in the sense that we will come back first to kind of pods of 15 non-contact, so that's the chance to really assess our skills and our technique and our technical aspect of it. And like, inside the wall, making sure everyone has a ball, stuff like that off the wall and kind of focusing on that, doing a bit of you can do a Tabata session in the wall, like lay out 4 exercises and you have 30 seconds at an exercise and you move on, you rotate around. I find that really good for assessing kind of technical stuff. And you might be striking low off the wall, first touch, and following in, first touch. You might be striking low, follow in, first touch, hand pass off the wall. You might be striking to hand off the wall, that kind of stuff. So you'll have a chance to do that, do some applied skills, I'd be saying, Oisín, I suppose it's just it's hard to know what we'll be left back to first, but what I would be doing anyway is I would be trying as much as possible to find inventive ways of getting them back into kind of playing matches or playing games as quick as possible, because they've been away from it for so long, and I suppose the development has been hindered by it for so long that it's going to be hard to kind of get them to adapt back to it quickly. So we used to, when I had the 10s in Bruff for a few weeks there, it was nice to go back and coach 10s as opposed to coaching inter-county young fellas the whole time. It was nice to go back to the club and do some stuff, but we used to do some 3v3s. So kind of like a bit of FIFA Street or something like that, like that game that used to be out years ago. I played it anyway, I don't know about anyone else, but kind of just 3v3, kind of a real emphasis on kind of individuality and skills, and kind of the goals might be 20 yards apart. 3v3, you score a goal, you're out, you concede, you stay in, and having 3 or 4 teams there ready to rotate in and out, and as soon as a goal is scored, they're out, that kind of stuff really, and getting them back to a bit of fun really is the main thing. There's no point coming back now from sessions and just going straight into drills the whole time, because they've been doing that at home off the wall all the summer, and we'll be doing it for the last year and going ahead again. So give them a chance to play really more than anything else, I'd be saying.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I totally get that, and making sure they don't get injured when they come back as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah, gradually going
back
into
it, everything. These are the things we just need to look at. The other question I had was, how do you handle, if you have a team, we have a group of 30 lads, how do you group them in terms of ability or skill or size or anything like this? If you're putting a session together, do you try and keep the same lads together, or what way do you do it? If you're putting games together for them, if it's 3 against 2 or 3 against 1, do you try to get people more challenged or less challenged, or?
So it is a tricky one, right? But when it comes to kind of the games-based approach and for kids, I suppose at times, they won't hit their growth spurt at different times, all of them, but there's no point having the small lad not marking the big lad, really, or vice versa, because like the small lad has to learn how to play. Like he mightn't hit his growth spurt until he's 16, 17, you know, or something like that. So he has to develop the skills to be able to adapt and survive, and he'll take those on into later life. You know, you'd often see the small lad who is really, really skillful. He ends up being a really good player down the line because he's learned how to deal with it, you know. That was me. That was myself. Even when I was playing, I never hit a growth spurt. I'm still waiting for it at 31 years of age. I might never see it, I'd say. But, you know, you have to adapt different ways. You're marking bigger players, playing up the grades and stuff like that. And it's very important. You learn how to look after yourself and how to focus on your skills and stuff. But equally then for the very, very important thing, we had Anya McNamara was on with us recently in the academy talking about the good players or the bigger players or the players in the first bracket of the year, you know, players born January, February, March, you know, who are generally going to be bigger than the players born in, you know, September on, you know, the kind of second or the third and fourth quarter of the year. Just challenging those lads. So what might you do with those lads? If you're a really good lad in a session, you might say, Oisín, tonight you're not allowed to score. You know, tell him he's not allowed to score in the session and he has to pass the whole time. Oisín, tonight you're not allowed to use your right side, so you have to use your left side the whole session through. So it's just about coming up with inventive ways of kind of tailoring the session. And what you'll do is if you prevent the big lad who scores all the goals, if you tell him he's not allowed to score tonight, well, inevitably then he's going to have to bring more players into the game. Your best player, if you tell him he's not allowed to score tonight, right? Generally, you do a session, right? There's a chance to score 10 goals. He scores 9 of them, right? But tell him he's not allowed to score tonight, and then he will have to bring more players into the session. But then equally, make sure you tell him why you're doing it, right? But reward him afterwards and tell him, listen, Oisín, really good job there. You brought so many players into the game tonight. You know, 8 different fellas scored goals. That was brilliant, you know. But then I suppose, look, when you're doing the games-based approach then and stuff, maybe when you're gradually building it into it, right? Maybe just be conscious of the best players being paired with the players who haven't developed as quickly, you know. So maybe put those lads on the one side of it. If it's a game halved, you know, if there's 2 halves, 2 sides to the game, we'd say it's 3v2 versus 3v2, right? Just make sure the lads on one side are kind of of equal ability at the start anyway, and gradually, I suppose, build in a bit of difficulty for both sides. You know, because you don't want to turn them off it straight away. You want them getting as much touches of the ball as possible and becoming as comfortable as possible under pressure. And I suppose just go about it gradually is what I'd say.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Just John Williams has a question there, John, if you want to fire away.
Yeah.
I'm not great at technology, Oisín, but hopefully you can hear me.
Right.
Hi, Paul. And that's a fantastic session tonight, Paul. No, I was only interested in one thing about. We talk about the swarm tackle a lot nowadays, and Limerick, in my opinion, are the top dogs at it by, you know, but what Limerick do in particular, and you noticed in the All-Ireland this year again, Waterford in particular, was very evident, where they swarm at the right time. The forwards will almost wait for the opposition man. He's either hesitant or making a slight mistake, and bang, they're in. And it's how do you get that across in a session, really, to swarm at the exact right time? Because you can swarm a fella, but if he's the ball stuck to him, you're not going to get it off him. But if he's hesitant, or the opposite lad is hesitant or doing a mistake, Limerick are brilliant at that timing.
Yeah.
No, and just wonder, can you bring that into? Is that just in the DNA, or is it coached? Like, you know,
no, it's coached. It's coached, John. 100% coached, and brought in over time in sessions. There's 2 parts that I'd say, right? The first part is having players who are willing to stay in the game. I put it like that. So if you have a corner forward there and the play is on the 45, there's no point him standing on the 13, right? So he needs to stay in the game. He needs to be on the move. He needs to be willing to close down space, you know. And as you said there, when the mistake comes, then like the first part is having players willing to stay in the game. Okay, yeah. So that's the beauty about the GAA at the moment. Anyway, hurling and football, you're generally, if the ball's in your half of the field, you're generally in the game at the moment, right? Because of the way the game is played. And I suppose fellas looking for passes and stuff like that. And I suppose delivery of ball now is a really big thing. So people are looking to move the ball into the right delivery zone. So it just keeps the ball in your area for a bit longer, if you get me. But first part, getting players who are willing to stay in the game and their work rate is high. The tackle from behind is a big part of that, you know. And I suppose, as I said earlier, rewarding the tackle in sessions, you know, and really putting a huge emphasis that the tackle is as important as the goal, right? And the second part within it is getting players to identify the mistake. You know, so in the session, like if you wanted to build that into your session, you might do some overloads, right? But you might do it where you'd have a short, it wouldn't be a large overload, it'd be what I call a short overload, right? Where you might have 5, 6, 7 v5, you might even do in a bit of a grid, right? So that way then there's enough players in there that when the mistake comes, they can identify it and try and get in to cut it out. Because if you were to do that with 5v2, you could make a mistake and the player might never get there, you know? So just I suppose just giving them the chance in training, giving them the chance in training to identify the mistakes and get in there and nail it, you know. Listen, from training with the lads in Limerick, I can tell you that as soon as a mistake is made, fellas are roaring and shouting and they're telling you get in there, like, you know, it's identified by the group, and they do wait for the right moment, but they often, what you'll see is they stay in the game, you know, the whole time. There's a great clip there from a point that I think it was a point Declan Hannon scored in the final there. There was that really, really good move where the off the shoulder run, that really, really good point in the first half. But if you look at the start of that clip, Graham Mulcahy ran 50 metres to get, and he didn't even get a tackle in. I'd say all the Waterford player heard was his footsteps, you know. So, but it's just like, sometimes if you coach a team into that kind of mindset, the opposition teams know what's coming, so they're always looking behind them, or always kind of half hesitant, you know. So you can kind of, it is false in a sense, but like teams can fear what you're doing, you know. But like, I suppose just stay in the game is one thing, and I suppose giving them the opportunity to make tackles and identify mistakes and turn over ball in sessions, you know. No point having them not turn over ball in sessions if that's what you're looking for in a match. So that's really important. And I suppose just from that point of view, as I said, rewarding the tackle and having it as important as a goal, you would rarely hear the Limerick lads ever talking about what they scored in a match or what this fella scored. It'd always be how many tackles did you get? How many tackles did the team get? That's really the main things that are looked at. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Thanks very much. Yeah. Is it okay if I ask a second question?
Go on, the more the merrier.
Yeah. No, another thing like you showed there was in some of the game-based plays where you had the centre in the smaller groups, and you full forward line and a full back line at one end on each other and all that. More, if you come back to maybe kids' ages, would you in the small sided games, would you allocate forwards with forwards, backs with backs, or would you just simply mix them up, like, you know, that kind of way? Or for certain parts, or would you focus on keep a full forward line together, keep a half forward line together, or would you, you know, or at what age would you even start doing that? So we say, you know.
Yeah. So look, I suppose from my point of view, I would be saying that up to about 15, 16, you shouldn't really be pigeonholing any player, you know. You should be giving them the opportunity to try loads of positions, and to, like, just because the fella's big doesn't mean he has to play full forward, or you know, just because your father played in goals, John, doesn't mean you have to play in goals, like, you know. So stuff like that. So don't pigeonhole the players. Give them loads of opportunity to try different positions. Now, in saying that, when it does come down to coaching up the age grades, you know, and getting into fail and stuff like that, you're going to know who your full forward line, your full back line is and stuff like that. You're going to know who your centre back is. You're going to know your centre forward. Like, so there's no point, if you have a fella and he's a corner back, there's no point having him playing out half forward, like, in a game, just because you haven't given the time to thinking about it a bit more and kind of giving him the chance. So expose players to where they're going to be playing up the age grades, but in saying that, give them the opportunity to find their best position. Like, as I said, maybe one day you'll have it laid out that a lad is playing as a full back. Maybe the next day he's playing centre forward. You've a thought about and you want to see it, and maybe the next day you want to try him full forward, you know. So I would be saying, listen, I suppose the best thing about the failure going to 15, I see in my view anyway, from clubs, is that they get the extra opportunity at under 13 level to not at under 14 level now is not competitive, you know. So I think it's a really good opportunity. Like, you come straight out of 12s there where it's non-competitive, and you get thrown straight into the failure where it comes ultra competitive, and all the emphasis is on winning a fail and all this, whether it is right or wrong. Even the kids themselves want to win a failure, right? Regardless of how much emphasis you put or don't put on it. Okay, but I think the beauty of the age grade change in the GAA, and the fact that failure is 15 now, is it gives another couple of years to develop players and find their best positions, you know. So don't pigeonhole them too early, John, I'd say, but at some point you do have to start focusing the sessions in on where they're playing and exposing them to like exposing a cornerback to marking a corner forward the whole time, you know, and exposing a centre back to marking a centre forward and stuff like that. Midfielders marking midfielders and half backs and half forwards marking each other, you know. So at some point you do have to focus in on it, but not too soon, not too early, I'd say.
Yeah, very good. No, thanks very much, Paul. Thanks for that. Great. Thanks, Oisin.
Yeah, sorry, there's a question from Therese Morris. Her mic isn't working on her iPad.
All right.
And she's a coach with the academy. So we've gone from inter-county through Fela and back down to the academy. We just started playing small matches in the academy before lockdown. The kids they're 2014, so they're 6 and 7 year olds.
Okay.
So my own assigned group of say 10 kids, half of the group were ready to play a match and the rest weren't there yet. So what would you suggest to get them ready to engage in games again or engage in a match?
So they're 6 years of age, right?
7 years of age.
7 years of age, right? I would be saying at that age grade, like, I suppose if I could ask there, Oisin, you like Therese might be able to say it now, but what kind of size-sided games are we playing here? Are they 5-a-side, 10-a-side, 15-a-side? Do you know, what are they?
They would be at that age. They'd be 5 to 7-a-side, I think, wouldn't they?
Okay, right. Yeah. So I would be saying
5-a-side. Paul, sorry,
5-a-side, right? So if kids aren't able for 5-a-side and they're struggling a bit, right? Well, like, let the kids who are able for 5-a-side, let them play a bit of 5-a-side, right? Or maybe, you know, whatever. But like at one side then of the pitch, like if you have enough mentors or you can spare the hands, or maybe you don't play 5-a-sides, you divide all of them up into maybe play 2v2s, play some 1v1s, play some 2v2s, give them the opportunity to adapt gradually. That I would be saying, you know, at 7 years of age, 5-a-side, like, it can be tough going for some kids. They're just not able for it, you know. They're 6 years of age, some of them 7 years of age, you know, it's tough going. You know, so just give them the opportunity to play smaller sided games. I'd be saying way more touches of the balls. As I said, way more opportunities to score goals, way more opportunities for a bit of contact, and, you know, and you compare them often with kids maybe who aren't quite ready yet, you know, and as I've said earlier, and because we'll gradually build them in, you know, and after a couple of weeks of playing 2v2s, maybe they're ready for 3v3s, you know, and then play another couple of weeks of 3v3s, and then maybe 4 or 5 weeks down the line, a month down the line, maybe they're ready for 5v5s then, you know, so gradually building it into it. So I'd be saying, if you're dividing your pitch out and we'll say we have 30 players and 20 of them are ready for 5v5s, right? So we have 2 5v5s going, and then on the other side then we make a couple of small pitches and we have 2 or 3 2v2s going as well, or even a 1v1, you know, and just giving them the opportunity to learn how to play the game and I suppose get, as I said, enjoy it, get loads of touches, score loads of goals, I'd be saying.
Yeah, brilliant. That makes sense. There's another question there from Donna Williams. Donna, if you want to take over there.
Yeah, perfect. Hi, Paul. I just have a question just in relation to the tackle you were talking about.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to see, just reading Sean Finn's description of the tackle. I know he's a clubmate of yours. I consider him probably the best at the simple things, though, in terms of flicking, blocking, hooking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to like standing the man up. My question is more in relation to younger lads, though. When should the shift go from like the simple things of defending, flicking, blocking, hooking, to what you're talking about there, body position, core strength, standing the man up, stuff like that? I know you're talking about it with the under 10s, but would it be best first to teach the basics of defending in terms of the blocking, hooking, tackling, as opposed to
of course, Donna, like
core, on your shoulder work and your chest, like standing man up with the chest, core, shoulders, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's definitely a part to play in all of it. Like, you know, you can't, as I said, you can't abandon it. Like, and I suppose you need to work on the block and the hook as we go up along, and flicking and give time to that, you know. But like equally, you can build them all into one part of it as well, you know. And you can, as I said, you can add in the hurley and the flick and stuff to that. But I would be saying, look, you have to. This is what I'm saying. You can't go into this kind of stuff too young, you know, and the game's best approach and things. And you have to give the time to the isolated skills, right? And they still have to be able to block and hook. Okay. I wouldn't be getting massively hung up on it either, you know. Like, it's it's a bit like the ground strike, really, you know, the way the game is going. And I'm not for 1 minute saying on camera here that the hook and the block has gone out of the GAA, right? But it's like what we're saying here is that you have to give time to both, don't you? Like, you can't just give time to the hook and the block on its own without introducing a bit of this, because it's such an integral part of the game now. And kids are going to be asked to do it all the way up along. So at least get them to start it in it as soon as you can. But at the same time, yes, give it time to isolate it down and do some hooking and blocking. Like, you'll be dividing your season up into phases, you know, and maybe you might be introducing something like the tackle here to the lads until phase 2 or phase 3 even of the season. But in phase 1, it might be all hooking and blocking, you know, but you just need to divide your season out like that a small bit. And as I said, putting a bit of thought into what is coming. Yes, Shawnee is superb at, like, Shawnee, as we said there, like, he rarely has to tackle because most of the time he's coming out with the ball, you know, but I suppose he does spend, the boys would spend, even at adult level there now, you'd be surprised how often the lads might take a break there for 5 minutes and actually just literally be throwing up an imaginary ball and hooking, or throwing up a ball for a fella to block or get the hurling the line of it, or working on hooking and working on flicking. I remember being up at a training camp in Johnstown House there in 2019 actually, and we spent half a day nearly gave to those kind of aspects of the game because the mileage was high on the legs and we needed to do something different. So like maybe an hour or two of a session nearly was all really low level stuff, kind of technical stuff, and it was given to hooking and blocking. So no, I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm just saying that you must introduce the tackle.
I completely agree. I just mean in relation to, let's say, maybe not 10-year-olds, but if let's say you're going with 8-year-olds, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you mightn't even
won't be going out saying arms out.
No, you might even introduce the tackle to them at 8-year-old.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. So I'm saying at that age grade, they just need to be able to get to focus on the ball the whole time, and they need to know how to protect themselves hooking and blocking, so they don't get too close and break their thumb hooking, so that they keep the hurley up and they're blocking and they don't get the hurley in the face. All those things are so important. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, when it comes to, say, like if you're going down the levels with this now, you might down the levels here now, you might have a completely separate kind of inverted pyramid where it's all technical skills, you know. So they're working on, at 6s in the nursery, say they're working on just striking and just maybe practicing the roll lift and stuff like that. And then obviously the hook and the block might be coming in here at different age grades up along, and you mightn't even introduce the games based side of things till they're even 10, and maybe they're not ready for till 11. Like, that's up to the coach to decide really, but you have to give the time at the younger age grades 100% to technical skills. I'm not for 1 minute saying that game base is 100% the way to go. I fully agree. You have to be technically competent before you do a lot of this stuff, really.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Mina.
No matter.
I think that is all the questions from everybody. Paul, just on behalf of everybody, that was brilliant. That was really, really good. Really interesting, and I'm kind of really interested myself in how you brought in ideas from other sports, because that's one of the things I find. You know, you're looking at other sports and you're telling as it's that trying to transfer and looking and seeing, well, we have the same problem here, so how do we fix it? And they fix these problems in other, and like I said, American football and basketball, etc.
Yeah.
So a lot of food for thought there. Thank you very, very much for that. Really interesting. I know from the engagement there, a lot of people are interested in it. So if that's all right with everybody, we'll leave it at that. And I'll have the recording of this and I'll share the recording around. And I think I said, like Paul said, he'll send on the presentation, or if there's any other questions anybody has after this.
Yeah, if anyone wants to stay on after log on to ask a different question, and I'll stay on for a couple of minutes. And I suppose if anyone wants to drop me an email there, or even a WhatsApp or anything, or a text message, I'll happily answer them. I wouldn't be the best to reply at times now, but I will eventually get back to you. So thanks a million, lads. Really enjoyed chatting. All right, cheers.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks everybody else for taking the time as well. It was really, really good.